Hi, I'm Jo from JHLeather, and in this video we're going over a number of ways to get the best possible edge finish on your vegetable tanned leather projects. There are a few different ways we can achieve the shiny, smooth edges we are all after for our leatherwork, and the main thing we need to look at is the edge preparation. So we're going to want our edges to be as level as possible, and to get that result we have two options. Either we add a trim allowance to our projects or we sand the edges. Now in my opinion, adding a trim allowance gets you the best results, as your project is already going to be held together either by gluing or stitching, and so the layers of the leather are not going to move. Now you can add as big an allowance as you like. I generally use 1/4 of an inch or 6mm, and I prefer to trim after I've done my stitching. Now by having the trim allowance, all the layers of the project are going to be nice and level, so when we move on to the staining and burnishing, we are giving ourselves the best chance at getting the smooth shiny edges that we want. Now depending on what you're making, adding a trim allowance may not always be possible, like on a buckle turn on a belt for example. Now we can help ourselves here by ensuring the layers are glued or tacked as level as possible before we get stitching. Once the piece is together, we can then prepare the edges for finishing. Now you'll see that on most of my projects where I am not using the trim allowance, I will have stained the edges first. Now the reason for that is that if you get glue on the raw edges of leather, this can form a waterproof barrier and won't allow the stain to penetrate into the leather, which is not what we want. When you are ready to do your final staining and polishing, we're going to sand the edges of our leather where there are multiple layers to get them level and smooth. This is also going to loosen the fibres a little bit, and so it will allow the stain to absorb more easily into the leather. When it comes to the actual stain I use, my preferred choice is a water-based stain, as it doesn't contain some of the harsh chemicals that can be found in spirit dyes. So there are two main types of stain which I use, which are the water-based ones from Metropolitan Leather, which are great and come in a range of colours, and I also mix my own stains up, which you can find more information on in this video linked up here. For the application of stain, I like to use a wool dauber and a paintbrush for smaller areas, but you can use whichever method you prefer. Now for the actual polishing part, there are three tools that I like to use here: the stain cloth, and now I like to use Irish linen, a bone folder, or a wooden burnisher. This can be handheld or a machine like the one I have here from Just Woods. Now what we're aiming for when polishing is to create friction and use any or a combination of the tools that I just listed to smooth the fibres in the leather down and to get a really nice polished edge. Now different leathers will polish up differently, and this will also vary from height to height, so it is something to be aware of. My chosen method is to apply the stain to the edges with my wool dauber and then use a polishing cloth to remove any excess stain before moving on to the burnishing machine. So you will pick the groove that best fits your project and use that to polish the edges of your leather. Now I like to hold my piece underneath the burnisher, and what we want to do is apply a small amount of pressure here to really get the fibres nice and smooth and flat. Now if you don't have a burnishing machine, you can still get the same results with some elbow grease. You can use the polishing cloth all on its own, which is what I would generally do for an initial staining, or where I am staining where there is just a single layer of leather. And I have found that the older and more stained the cloth is, the better the polished edge you will get on your leatherwork. You can also wrap this around the bone folder or use your thumb and put pressure on the edge and polish the length of your project to get some really nice, smooth and polished edges. Now I use the bone folder on its own around buckle turns, as it can easily fit in between the fittings and the loops, and again we're going to apply some pressure here and rub the bone into the leather to get some nice shiny edges and make it look like there is not a joint in this area. For areas where there are 2 or more layers of leather, I will use the wooden slicker, and these come in various sizes, and I have a couple here from Just Woods, where one has the rounded grooves and the other has flat ones, as well as an old one that I've picked up from Metropolitan Leather. Like on the burnishing machine, we're going to pick the groove that best fits our leatherwork and get rubbing. For larger pieces, I will stain a little bit at a time and then polish that section before moving on to the next. And I will do that with both the burnishing machine or if I'm hand burnishing. Now I find that I get the best results with my burnishing when the stain is still a little bit damp. Now you can go over this multiple times, so if it does dry into the leather, you can go over it again, no problem. Now there are a couple methods to help you with those super shiny edges, the first one being the awesome product that is Tolkanol. Now I have the clear one here in the workshop as I use it on a few different colours of leather and stain, but you can also get this in black and brown. We are going to apply a small amount of the Tolkanol to the edges of our leatherwork, and we're going to rub that in and then leave it a second or so before we start polishing. Now when it comes to using the Tolkanol, I actually prefer polishing this by hand as I like to use the stain cloth. Now you can use whichever burnishing method that you like the most, and we're just going to rub the edges of our leather once more and they're going to come up really nice and shiny and smooth. Alternatively, when using the burnishing machine, I like to apply some beeswax to the burnishing attachment and then polish the edges of my projects with that, and it gives a really nice finish to your projects as well. Now that is the process that I use to get the best edges on my veg tanned leather projects, and there will be links in the description to all the products that I have talked about in this video. Now if you have your own tips, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below so that other people can learn from you. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please click the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos and tutorials, and I shall see you in the next video.